Good afternoon, Rotarians. Welcome to our weekly Club 99 meeting, the best reason to look away from your investment accounts today. To start things off, we're going to have the four-way test, prayer, and pledge led by Kelly Fleming, then guest introductions with Rajesh Chakani. We'll invite Kelly to kick things off.
Good morning. The four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Please bow your heads. Almighty One, thank you for the gift of another day and another opportunity to serve others. We are grateful to be part of an organization that chooses to spend its resources, including time, money, relationships, and skills, in ways that bring support and encouragement. Help us walk in community with our neighbors and share peace and respect with our global family. We pray a special blessing today on our new Madagascar friends who remind us of all we share in common with the broader humanity. With abiding gratitude, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I would introduce the guest whom we have today with us. I would request the guests to stand and remain standing with their members. And I would request all of our Rotarians to kind of hold their applause till I introduce every one of them. So the first guest we have is Revis Edmonds from Jim Jackson, introduced by Jim Jackson. Ashley Fondren by Kathy Tuggle. Eddie Garrett by Jacob Garrett. Kate Buck by Dan Young, Caroline Witherspoon by Colin Crawford, Marshall from Bond AI by Ross Burnett, Mary Ryle by Jim Jackson. Is it Nanny Ryle by Jim Jackson? Paul Getling by Dr. Leckie, and last but not least, we have Chris Dudley, who is our Rotaract of Little Rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly and Rajesh, and thank you to today's greeters, Don Cole, Rick Fleetwood, Drew Harper, and Alex Talley. Thank you all for the smiling faces up front. We do have a few announcements today. We're starting with a reminder of our first service project of the year, that from our Dunbar Thrive Committee Chair, Misty Tharp. Misty?
I have a music quick prelude to me. That's really amazing. So we just had our first little event at Dunbar on Monday. I don't think Susan Altrui is here, but she was able to join me in welcoming the teachers back on campus on Monday. They had their first meeting with the principal, getting the year off started, and they were so excited to be there. Which leads us to this Thursday is our big cookout for the kids and their parents on campus at Dunbar. Don Cole has again agreed to, I don't know exactly where he went, there he is, to get the big grill out and cook. I'm thinking somewhere near like, I don't know, 150, 200 burgers and hot dogs. We will have close to 200 guests out there that we're going to be feeding. And reason why I'm up here to ask for some volunteers. We had some really great people come up and volunteer already, but we do still need a few more bodies out there. So we're planning on starting about 4:30 at Dunbar. We should be done somewhere around 6:30 or so. We're going to be wrapping up some burgers and hot dogs and handing them out to the kids and their families. So if you guys are able to carve out a little bit of time on Thursday, would love to see you out there. Karen has a sign up on the email, I think that was sent yesterday. I'm sure she'll send another reminder out to everybody. So if you can come join me. If you have questions, my name, of course, is on the roster. If you get to MIT, there's, I think, only one Mitzi on the roster, so you should get to me and give me a call or text or whatever if you need any more information. So thanks so much. Hopefully we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you, Mitzi. I am looking forward to that fun kickoff on Thursday. Mitzi, along with Susan Altrui, as she mentioned, started the week off right. They hosted a breakfast for the Dunbar teachers and administration yesterday. Thank you, Mitzi, for being such a great ambassador to our club. Next, we are excited to welcome our Ottenheimer Youth Exchange Program newest visitors, Michaela and Salohi from Madagascar. We'll invite them, along with Ottenheimer Committee Co-Chair T. Martin Davis, to the podium for a brief introduction.
We are so excited to celebrate the 76th year of the Ottenheimer International Scholars Program this year. We've invited two young ladies from Madagascar, and last night we had a welcoming reception. Thanks to everyone who joined us. It was a lot of fun. We had some lemurs visit us from the Little Rock Zoo. Actually, these were delivered by Amazon last week. But if you'd like to pet them, I know everybody, after our program 2 weeks ago, everybody was running around, I wish we had one here. Well, we have some today. We also have some wonderful young ladies here who have committed their time. They're going to be here almost a month, and they'll spend 3 days at the end of their trip in Washington, D.C. We have a great committee. If you're on the Ottenheimer committee, would you please stand? Cindy Van Beckhoven is my co-chair, and when we have women, our female co-chair is kind of in charge of things. So she's actually the boss this year. She's got the schedule. If you're interested in helping us, we do have some holes in the schedule. We've got it over there. And if you come by today and you sign up for something, we'll let you pet the lemur. The Ottenheimer program is just so inspiring to those of us who are on the committee, particularly at this time in the world where there's so much conflict. The program was established by Gus Ottenheimer. It's exclusive to our club. It's funded often by the Ottenheimer Brothers Foundation, but also by our club and other donors. Gus started the program right after World War II, when there was so much conflict in Europe, and he hoped to show others in other countries our way of life, our economy, and our government. And so we hope to share our experience with these young ladies, and they're also going to share their experience as well. Let me introduce to you First of all, Saloni. Saloni is 23. If you come up, Saloni. Saloni is 23. She's a third-year student pursuing a bachelor's degree in computer science at CNAM Madagascar. Her career plan and goal is to become a market and trends analyst in the aerospace industry, specifically focusing on assisting airlines in her country. This is her first trip out of her country. She has worked with several nonprofit organizations and has served as a social emotional learning facilitator. What else would you like us to know about you, Saloni?
I think everything was told. You tell everything, but I just want to thank all of you for your warm welcome. We appreciate the fact that you welcomed us, and we can't wait to explore your city and explore your customs, and we can't wait to share to you our customs too. And thank you. That's all.
Last night, we were honored to have a ceremonial dance by our young ladies to welcome them. We were welcoming them, and they were dancing in celebration of their experience here. What was the name of the dance that you did last night?
It was Tankarana dance from the north of Madagascar.
From the north of Madagascar. Great. Our other scholar is Michaela. Michaela is also 23. 21, okay.
Sorry.
I thought I should not even mention ages today. This year she will be finishing her Master 2 degree in geological engineering. It's interesting, and she's interested in helping her country effectively use its abundant mineral resources to develop the infrastructure and services of her country to improve their standard of living, but also to improve working conditions in her country. After you have a chance to visit with her, I think you'll also agree that she may have a political future in her country. Michaela has traveled with her family to Thailand in 2009, but she's had no other travels outside of her country. Please tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Salama Guriabi. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. Yes, my name is Michaela. I'm 21, and what I would like to say is just Little Rock is just amazing. Arkansas is beautiful, and I can't wait to share my culture with you and to discover yours also. And yeah, thank you very much. And Miss Saucha.
Well, we're so glad to have you. They will be here each week until they leave for Washington at the end of the month. So please introduce yourself. They're dying to meet us all. Thank you.
Thank you, T. Martin, for the words, and welcome, Michaela and Salohi. I got to speak with them briefly at the welcome event yesterday. I can say with confidence the Ottenheimer Committee continues to raise the bar with impressive young adults that they bring from around the world. I'm looking forward to getting to know them better over the next few weeks, and I'd like to thank the other Ottenheimer co-chair, Cindy Van Beckhoven, who has helped coordinate every detail of this lady's visits. Your organization makes sure that the visit is fun and educational for all. In line with our Rotary Year theme of Global Hearts, Local Hands, I've decided to use my President's Minute to highlight Rotary clubs around the world. There are more than 46,000 Rotary clubs worldwide. We'll take a minute to learn about one other club a week from their history, membership, or special projects that they support. I've been trying to tie the Club of the Week to our meeting, but in this case, telling you about the oldest and largest club in Arkansas would be a little bit of a redundancy. So instead, I'm going to go back to Arkansas's earliest explorers and highlight French explorer Jean-Baptiste Bernard de la Harpe, who named Little Rock, or La Petite Rocher, in 1722, the history of which we commemorated with past President Denver Peacock during the tricentennial celebration. De la Harpe was originally from Saint-Malo, France. The city was originally settled by Gauls and then Romans in the 1st century BC. It evolved into a monastic settlement founded by St. Brendan the Navigator, was briefly an independent republic for 3 years, and became a pirate capital in the 19th century. Their location and storied maritime history lend credence to their many explorers, including de la Harpe, as well as Jacques Cartier, the man who discovered and named Canada. Saint-Malo currently hosts 2 Rotary clubs, the oldest of which was founded in 1930. Club 10791 currently has about 30 members, and much of their philanthropy is focused on the next generation. They have an annual fundraiser to support children fighting cancer, and they too have a version of the Oppenheimer program. They have an international youth exchange program. Most recently, they welcomed delegates from Cartagena, Colombia. So this week, we will toast the Rotary Club of Saint-Malo, France, Club 10791. Next, I will invite Stephanie Street to the podium to introduce today's speaker. Stephanie?
Oh, I like that walk-up music. Good afternoon, everybody. It is my honor today to introduce someone who is respected and beloved by folks from across our community here, across the state and our nation, and on both sides of the aisle. He is the epitome of a true Renaissance man, and a personal point of pride for me and for the Street family is that he is also my 3rd cousin. Justice Morris Shepard Buzz Arnold taught law for 15 years and spent the last 40 years as a judge on 3 federal courts: the United States District Court for the Western District of Arkansas, the United States Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit, and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court of Review. In addition to these day jobs, he has enjoyed a 45-year side hustle as an author and has published 5 books, contributed 2 textbooks, and has written more than 24 articles on colonial Arkansas. He lives here in Little Rock with his wonderful wife of 32 years, Gail. Please join me in welcoming Judge Arnold here to the stage.
The music stopped. I thought we'd have more music. Well, thank you. That's good. All right. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Stephanie. Stephanie's done so much for our community and does such a great job for the Clinton Foundation. We owe her and this group a great deal. She's helped me on projects over the years, for which I've been very grateful. And she's even willing to admit in public that she's my cousin, which I have to say is not true of all my cousins. So you're a brave person and a good friend, and I appreciate you and have for many years. I want to thank my friend Chris Mangum for the invitation. We must be doing something really good here in Little Rock to be able to attract people like Chris and Gabrielle, his wife, to our good community. He's exactly the kind of person who can add so much to what we do and what we aspire to here. And I'm counting on him to bring a whole lot of other people in his train. So if we don't have a big immigration, I'll send a marshal after you, all right? I mean, we need more people like Chris. And so it's my very great pleasure to be here with you today and talk to you about colonial Arkansas. I started to call this talk Colonial Arkansas. Say what? Do what now? I mean, it's not a phrase you often hear, and if you read it out loud, it may have left a rather odd ring in your ears. I know it did mine when 45 years ago I first heard it. But we did have a colonial history. A lot of people think it's so faintly ridiculous, even oxymoronic. What could that be? Sturdy hill folk walking around in tri-cornered hats, something like that. But no, we had a colonial history and a very eventful one. These two maps show you what the two periods of Arkansas colonial history looked like in terms of the geopolitical world. From, let's say, around 1682 to the 1760s, the French claimed the entire mid-continent. They laid claim to the entire mid-continent of the Middle America. There were only about 20 Frenchmen in the whole place, but never mind. You got to start somewhere. And this will give you an idea of what they claimed was the whole Mississippi River Valley, the Mobile River Valley, and all the lands that all of those rivers and their tributaries drained. In other words, it was about half of the United States. The French abandoned North America, and technically in 1763, but physically not until 1768, really, when the whole geopolitical situation changed. France was gone, no more blue. What we have now is just the yellow. Spain took over the western part of Louisiana, and Britain took over the eastern part. This will give you this is kind of a skeletal view of what the Mississippi Valley looked like about 1780, in other words, about 100 years after the French claimed Louisiana. You'll see that Arkansas Post is out in the middle of nowhere, and that was exactly the reason it was important, because it was the only place that Europeans could stop that was even marginally reliable between the Natchez, which was barely a settlement, and the upper Louisiana Territory, which was called the Illinois Territory, where St. Genevieve and Cahokia are. So between Natchez and the upper territory is a stretch of almost 800 miles. And this is the only European settlement in it during the entire 18th century. Well, there a couple came very late, but for the most part, I mean, well, I won't go into it, but this is essentially what it was about. And it was a journey from Natchez to St. Genevieve of maybe 2 months. From New Orleans to St. Louis took 3 months. So even though Arkansas Post was tiny, it was a very welcome sight to people after that longer journey. Now, let me give you a little more focused view of it. Here we're in Deshay County on the north there, well, Arkansas County, and Deshay County over to the west, and Deshay County on the south. Gillette, somewhere up in the northwest corner there. Dumas is kind of in the southern part. That'll give you some idea of where we are. That big island there is Big Island. And you can see the post moved around. It was actually in 3 different places. It was founded in 1686 by an Italian in the French service named Henri de Tonty, after whom Town is named in northwest Arkansas. And it moved several times during the 18th century because of flooding and because of changes in its strategic mission. and because of warfare. But it finally came to rest where the National Park Service now maintains the Arkansas Post National Memorial, which is near Gillette. So I put our colonial period between 1686, which is when our first European settlement was made, and 1804, when an American Army lieutenant came into Arkansas Post and took over the Spanish fort there. Now, the French located the post where they located it because that's where I'll get it in a minute, it's a little slow. That's where the Quapaw Indians lived. This is a highly romanticized, but nevertheless accurate view of how the Quapaw Indians greeted important visitors, Europeans and Indian alike. You can see it's got all the features that we know were actually there. You've got your Frenchman with his tri-cornered hat. I told you we had him here. You have an Indian chief with what the Western movies have taught us to call the peace pipe. The French called it the calumet. You have the chief with his headdress. You have dancers. You have drummers. You have people shaking gourds. You have the Quapaws hoisting, this man's name was Jean Bossu, on their shoulders, preparatory to carrying them all the way to their village for a feast, an all-night gathering, and general hootenanny. Now, in case you're wondering if people like this guy in this picture actually lived here, they did. Here's a fellow named Alexandre Declouet, who was commandant of Arkansas Post in the 1760s. It doesn't get much more Gallic than this. You can see he has his steel breastplate on. That gorget at the top, I think, is probably the Order of Louis of St. Louis, and that's a military decoration. And so he ruled both the civilian settlement and the garrison, he and his successors, and his Spanish successors as well. Well, why did they come? Why did the French want to come here? As I said, they wanted to be near the Quapaws, but why? Well, first of all, they wanted the Quapaws to turn into purveyors. They wanted the foodstuffs that the Quapaws could provide for the garrison and for the settlement and for the convoys that went up and down the Mississippi River and the Arkansas River and the White River. So that was one of the reasons. Of course, they wanted peltries and furs as well. But most important, and people may not know this, they were looking for military assistance from the Quapaws because the French had enemies across the Mississippi River, the Chickasaw Indians, who were in the English interest. And we all know the French and the English didn't get along too well then. They still don't. And so the French were looking for somebody who could help them keep the English and the Chickasaws out of what they thought was their territory. So they said to the Quapaws, what do you think? And the Quapaws were most willing because for decades they've been carrying on a running feud with the Chickasaws anyway. So this was like manna for them. This was, the old saw, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they welcomed the French with open arms. They developed a symbiotic relationship with them, which is not something you hear a great deal about these days in modern history telling, but it was truly symbiotic. And so this is a 1835 rendering. It's mostly generic, I think, of the Quapaws on the trail, but they were, even in France in the 19th century, they were famous for their allegiance to the French and vice versa. But what else do they want? As I said, military aid, and this alliance has actually left behind a beautiful, objective evidence of its existence. This is a painted buffalo hide that a Quapaw or Quapaws executed near Arkansas Post sometime around 1740. It now resides in a museum in Paris, and it shows a battle between the Quapaws and the Chickasaw Indians on the left-hand side. It shows on the right hand a victory dance by Quapaw men and women. And it shows underneath there the Quapaw villages. And you can see they're doing a dance, and these are the 3 Quapaw villages underneath. Perhaps most remarkable of all, is if you look at the far right-hand edge along the bottom trailing edge there, you see 4 little buildings. Those are actually the buildings of the fort at Arkansas Post in 1740. It's the only picture we have of the entire colonial post. And it was painted right here, not right here, down the river, in 1740 by Quapaw Indians. It's pretty remarkable. And here's a better view of it. You can see the dancers and the villages and the Arkansas Post. Now, further on, our consideration of the connection between the Chickasaws and this post, this woman is named Marie-Françoise Antoinette Petit de Coulonge de Villemont. Implausibly, she was born in Arkansas Post on September 23, 1732. If I last another 8 years, which I probably won't, I'll be able to celebrate her 30th birthday. But in case I'm not around, how about lifting a glass in her memory? Sorry, her 300th birthday. Lift a glass in her memory for me. She was, as I said, born in Arkansas Post in 1732. Her father was a commandant of Arkansas Post. He was one of those Frenchmen like Declouet, whose portrait I showed you. Her father, was killed in a war with the Chickasaws, in which he and the Quapaws were fighting together as comrades. So she moved on to New Orleans. But furthering this Chickasaw Quapaw connection, this is Marie-Madeleine Marguerite Broutin de Lino de Chalmette. She also lived in Arkansas Post. She was there in 1749 when the Chickasaws, rather annoyed by these attacks I've showed you that the French and the Quapaws were making on them, retaliated, came across from the other side of the Mississippi River, attacked the post, destroyed the civilian settlement, killed 8 men, carried off 20 women and children into captivity. But Madeline, she called herself, escaped that fate because she was in the tiny fort there because her husband was a commandant. You're beginning to see a pattern here, right? And so she survived the attack and later moved to New Orleans as well. How am I doing on time, Chris? Okay. Now, the French troops were able to fend off this attack. There were all of 12 French Marines here at the time, not more than 100 Frenchmen and a few slaves, enslaved Americans, Africans, and but they had a couple of 3-pounder cannons and some muskets, and a lucky cannon shot wounded one of the Chickasaw chiefs, so they decided it was time to retire. But with the settlement being destroyed, the French just moved up with the Quapaws where it was safe. So they had a symbiotic relationship, as I said. They traded together, they lived together, there was a certain amount of intermarriage, they fought together. The French not only helped them with supplies, mainly munitions, but they helped them in other ways, which is sometimes more difficult. They helped them through forbearance. They left them by leaving them alone. They didn't proselytize them. They did not apply their law to them. They didn't do any extensive farming or ranching, which often caused trouble between European settlers and native peoples because there was a certain amount of trespassing going on by animals and encroachment by farmers and all that. That didn't happen here because there weren't enough people, for one thing. At the height of its population, Arkansas Post was only about 400 white and blacks, and they were mostly traders and trappers and merchants. So they just didn't do much to the land at all. So scarcely, not even 10 years after this big battle, or rather after the French gave up the land to the Spanish, the American Revolution showed up in our area. In 1778, the Continental Congress sent a detachment of Marines all the way from Pittsburgh down to Arkansas Post. He had a company, it was a man named James Willing. He had a company of about 50 men. They were all volunteers. And for a time, he operated around Arkansas Post. His mission was to try to harass the British loyalists who lived along the Mississippi River, people who would not join the American Revolution, in other words, mainly who lived around Natchez. But anyway, he operated in this area for a time, and he got supplies and shelter and some advice from the Spanish commandant at Arkansas Post until he moved on downriver. But in 1783, the actual war came to Arkansas. This is an artist's rendition, but it's quite accurate of what Arkansas Post looked like. Fort Carlos III in 1783. You can see the fort there and the little French village around it. The peninsula is still there, and so is the site of the fort. But the fort's not ever really been discovered. I mean, there's not been much archaeology done down there at all, which is unfortunate because this is a venerable place. It was the first European settlement in all of what became the entire Louisiana Purchase. The first one. It's the same generation that founded Philadelphia and founded Charleston, founded this place. It deserves to have a little more attention. In other words, I'm tired of this. Somebody else has got to do it. But on April 17 of 1783, a band from, guess where, Chickasaws, English across the river, struck the Arkansas Post under the command of a fellow named Captain Jacques Colbert. His real name was James Colbert. He was a Scot. And they sent a little flotilla up the Arkansas River, landed downriver, I think farther downriver than this, but this will give you an idea, approached the little village there. You can see the little village is where they struck first, and the fort is behind the village. Here's a National Park Service rendition of the strike on the village. There were only 10 resident families there at the time. 4 of them got captured. The other 6 fled to the woods of the fort. This put the militia out of action. The militia, you will know, was anybody who was male and free and able-bodied between the ages of 15 and 50. So if you were in that group, you were just in the militia. It wasn't a matter of joining. I mean, you were it, and you were subject to being called up whenever the governor or the commandant felt like it. Well, the militia was put out of service. As it happens, the first militia muster in Arkansas was in 1780 in preparation for just this kind of attack. But it got neutralized. And as it further happens, in that muster, there were 2 fellows, one named Jean-Baptiste Imbeau and another named Joseph Imbeau. And we have here today in our presence a 9th generation descendant of those gentlemen in the person of our good friend Terry Rasco. Where are you, Terry? Ah, there you are. So congratulations. He's got 2 sons, 2 grandsons, 3, who are 11th generation Arkansans. So whenever I see Terry, I'm a jealous wreck. I mean, there's no way to compete with that. No way whatsoever. Well, after having neutralized the militia, the little force moved on to the fort and sort of settled down in a ravine and made a kind of a rifle pit out of it, fired their carbines more or less harmlessly, completely harmlessly against the oak stockades. They didn't have any artillery. There were about 70, 80 in the raiders' force. There were 70 Spanish soldiers inside the fort with great marksmen and all firing with their muskets. But more than that, and more importantly, they had a number of 4-pounder cannons and a bunch of swivel guns, and they laid down a barrage of more than 300 cannon rounds. At which point they got tired of it and decided they'd run out of the fort in a sally, and they did. They 10 Spanish soldiers and 4 Quapaw Indians who just happened to be around led this charge outside the fort, and they were whooping and hollering as the Indians scared Colbert's forces. They were undisciplined, totally to death. So, they took a powder. They ran off down the river, and they jumped in their little flotilla here. You can see it. It had some Indians with them, Chickasaw Indians, of course. Couple of another pirogues, they're called, dugout canoes. A keel boat, maybe a flatboat as well. But that wasn't the end of the engagement, because just a very few days later, this fella, Joseph Daudet de Vallière, who was a captain in the Spanish Fixed Infantry Regiment of Louisiana. I always have to squeeze that out. It's kind of complicated. Led a flotilla of boats and a bunch of dugouts with the Quapaws, who were, again, allied with the efforts to defend the fort. They went down the Arkansas River pursuing Colbert and his buddies. They engaged Colbert and defeated him and dispersed him, and that was the end of Colbert. This is a wonderful portrait. It's at the Historic Arkansas Museum. It shows Vallière decked out in his captain's uniform with the so-called Alliance cockade, the white for France, the red for Spain. They wore this, French and Spanish officers did, during the American Revolution, because they were both allied with us against the English, not because they loved us so much, but because they hated the English so much. So anyway, this was one of the last engagements of the American Revolution, and this gentleman ought to have a kind of special resonance for us here today, because he is the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of, wait for it, French Hill, our congressman. So if you want some straight line history, if you're wondering what in the heck is the relevance of all this, this is it. These people still rule over us, okay? Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Judge. It's an honorable side gig for a justice or a judge, a lawyer. I'm interested in whether you can explain the lack of archaeological curiosity, or is it lack of resources, or is the probability that all of that was swept away in the confluence of rivers that comes together there? Why has there not been any more curiosity about finding that fort, that historic site?
We just don't have the resources. I mean, it's a very important site, not just for European history, but for contact sites, as anthropologists like to call them. Very early, it's the earliest contact site in the entire lower Mississippi Valley between Indians and Frenchmen. And there has been recently a lot of paleobotany, they call it, work done that I've seen. It's not published, but it shows a mixture of foods, mixture of French and Indian indigenous foods being consumed down there in the 1720s, which is great evidence of the symbiosis that I talked about. There's been a lot of curiosity by a few odd ducks like me, but the resources just simply haven't been available. That's the short of it. Yes.
The last fellow you showed here, he was only 55 years old when he died. Did he die in action or from disease, or it's always interesting.
Oh, Vallière?
Yes.
He was in bad health. He died naturally. I just recently discovered that Vallière actually had retired to New Orleans because he'd had a mental breakdown of some kind. there's a, they're members of the Quapaw tribe, by the way, who are called Valuers. They call themselves Valuers. They're descendants of this fellow's son, I think. So there was, as I said, there was a certain amount of intermarriage, and his family is an example of that. So French Hill has got it both ways. He's got Quapaw chiefs in his line too. So, you know, he might be able to put a casino in here. I'm not sure. The video is not going, is it? Okay. Yeah.
So you mentioned your curiosity and termed yourself an odd duck. I'm just curious if you could explain the circumstances that triggered your curiosity in this niche topic of colonial Arkansas.
Well, I spent 15 or 20 years doing research. I taught medieval English legal history for 20 years in various law schools. That was my training. I spent a lot of time in the public record office going through medieval documents in Latin and French. And when I moved back to Arkansas, I was looking for some old stuff to read. So I did, and I went to France then, I went to Spain, I went to England. I've collected 10,000 pages of documents written to, from, and about Arkansas Post in the 18th century. And my wife's glad I finally got them out of the house. And they're over here at the Butler Center if anybody wants to look at them. So that's it. I mean, it was just a kind of a harmless fetish. That's all I can say. You know, I mean, nobody gets hurt, and some people are interested. Yes.
Merci beaucoup, Juge, pour votre présentation. My question is, I saw the picture of Marie Antoinette. I saw the picture of Marie Antoinette in your presentation, and I would like to ask, what is the link between her and the colonial Arkansas?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't hear well. What is the reason?
The link between her and the colonial Arkansas.
When she came to Arkansas?
Yeah.
Marie-Françoise, Petit de Coulanges, is that the one? Yeah, oh, yeah. Oh, well, she came here because her father was commandant. So she came with him. He came to Arkansas in 1731. He first tried to come up the river from New Orleans to take over the Arkansas Post. But his convoy with his troops was blocked in the river and turned back after a battle by, guess whom? The Chickasaws. So he finally was able to achieve the post, built a little fort there, but died during the Chickasaw Wars. But that's why she came, because she was just unlucky enough to have a father who was here. Yes.
During this colonial period, what was the relationship with the Quapaws and the French with the Caddo Indians in southwest Arkansas, if any?
Well, the Quapaws and the Caddos were trading partners. The Caddos traded a lot of things, including bodark, that is wood for bows, Osage orange, horse apples, you know, the yellow tree. It was a great bow wood. The Caddos made great bows, and they also made they also had salt works. So the Quapaws traded with the Caddos, and the Quapaws had great ceramics. So that was what the trade was. There was a little fort down in Texas, right outside of Texarkana, that La Harpe founded in 1719. It had a big, long French name, but its real name was the Caddo Post. And the Caddos and the French had a relationship in that area, and the Caddos had a relationship with the people in Natchitoches down the Red River, but not so much with the French at Arkansas Post.
Thanks for your comments about my ancestry. I did not grow up knowing about that ancestry. My brother, Jim, has gotten into Ancestry.com and all that sort of thing, and so several years ago he discovered that, and he was quite proud of it. And I said, Jimmy, before you get too proud about it, we grew up in DeWitt. We only got 25 miles away from Arkansas Post in 250 years. I mean, we weren't moving very far. But at any rate, another irony to that was that just one summer after high school, and again, way before I knew anything about any connections to Arkansas Post, other than it was there, I got a job along with some other college boys on an archaeological dig. And it was a dig that was instigated because the Post became a national site as opposed to a state park. And I think about 1965, somewhere around there, 65, 66. So once it became a national site, they did fund an archaeological dig. And I was just one of the high school boys that was hired as manual labor. And the archaeologists would tell us where to go and what to dig and that sort of thing. And we were just supposed to stop if we found anything interesting, and they would come sift the soil and find things. Well, I am proud to say that I found something of significance in one of our trenches, and it was the clay bowl of a pipe. Of course, the stems were replaceable and they were like wooden, but the bowl itself that held the tobacco was clay. And that bowl is on display at the Arkansas Post in the museum, and it was just something I saw as we were digging that trench and said, come over, we got something here. So it's a pretty cool thing, and I enjoyed telling my grandchildren about it, and took them down there a few years ago to see what Pops found when I was hunting about down there. Thank you very much, though.
Thank you.
Judge Arnold, could you describe the living conditions at the Arkansas Post? I mean, it can be rather inhospitable today. I'm wondering how they managed to survive in that area.
I have no idea. I mean, it's extraordinary. The Post developed from, as I said, it moved around, it was unstable. The population turned over, the French and African population turned over completely, at least every 20 years. It didn't really achieve anything like stability until 1779, when they finally came to rest where the Arkansas Post National Memorial is now near Gillette. And it wasn't really till the 1790s that a stable, even the beginnings of a stable agricultural society was formed. And this fellow, Declouet, I showed you, the guy with the steel breastplate, when he came to Arkansas Post, his orders were to try to make it self-sustaining. I'm not sure it ever was self-sustaining. I think it depended on the Indians right up until the end of the colonial period, because there weren't any substantial farmers there until the 1790s, until very late in the period. But in the 1790s, it was growing and it was flourishing, really. The housing there, in the 1730s and 1740s, the people complained about how, there's one priest said, I've been in really bad accommodations before, but I've never been in a house so full of holes as the one I'm in this house. And, but in the 1790s, I'm sorry I didn't bring a picture of them, the Creole Louisiana architecture arrived to Arkansas Post. It's the raised cottage house with the double pitch hip roofs with the umbrellas, the galleries all around, the French doors. They don't have the English casement windows. They have the windows that open. There's some houses like this in St. Genevieve, Missouri, that have survived. The church did not have a significant presence there until, well, it never really did have one. Well, in 1797, the first canonical parish was created. That's 110 years after they founded the place. But it lasted 3 years because the priest went off to St. Louis, which was a bigger and more important place. So the there was never a school there. So far as we know, there was never an inn there. So it was a pretty rough and rowdy place. There were some cabarets, as they called them. In other words, juke joints, and also some taverns where you could probably get a meal and a bed if you were desperate. Most people, there were people there who would put you up probably for some. Certainly that was true in the early American period. But the malaria and yellow fever and various other difficulties of that sort were rampant. There was, there was smallpox in the early days. The quapaws, there were probably 10,000 of them, maybe more, when the French first encountered them, 1670, let's say, 1700, 30 years later, there was 1,000. They lost almost 90% of their population because of smallpox and also warfare with, guess whom? The Chickasaws, who were slave raiding the Quapaws. That's why it was so easy for the French to establish the relationship.
So how was it affected by the flood of 1927? And were there other floods before that? Do we have any records of any other great floods on the Mississippi in that area?
Well, there was certainly a lot of flooding, especially in the downriver location in Deshay County. The one I showed you, it was there from 1756 to 1779. It was a sink. I mean, the houses were all built on 6-foot stilts, and they still had flooding. There were 4 years in a row where there were no crops. Then they had a crop, and guess what? There were 4 more years in a row when there were no crops. It was just, nobody could live there but these traders. That's why there were no farmers in the area there. The water up where the post finally settled near Gillette, it didn't flood so much. It was on something called École Rouge, Red Bluffs. That bluff may have been 80 feet tall at one time. Now it's barely visible because the Corps of Engineers had flooded the whole place, right? But it was up on a bluff, but the problem was the river was eating away at the bend. So it was, even though it wasn't flooded, the water was constantly causing the fort to have to be repaired or removed. So the water, and I'm sorry, 1927's kind of out of my period. I can't tell you about that. But it wasn't any good, I'll tell you that for sure.
Thank you, Judge Arnold.
Judge Arnold, what a wealth of history. Thank you for keeping that story alive. As a thank you to our presenters, we've commissioned local Arkansan Sage Holland, a master bead maker out of Mountain Home, Arkansas, to make a commemorative bead representing our Rotary Year theme of Global Hearts, Local Hands. Hopefully it'll serve as a pleasant reminder of your time with our club. Next week, we welcome Frank O'Mara, the author of the book, Bend, Don't Break, a 3-time Olympic runner from Ireland, former attorney and executive from Alltel, and a current combatant of early onset Parkinson's disease. We'll hear more about his story next week. See you then.